the echoing shadows of stone halls and candlelit chambers. Their stories have been muted, but today, we bring them into the light. This is the tale of medieval women, not passive footnotes to history, but vital architects of society, faith, and power. They lived in a world built by men, kingdoms, castles, and wars. Yet it was often women who held the threads together when the men marched off to battle, to council, or to distant courts. Absent from many histories, their roles were essential: stewards of estates, managers of households, silent counselors, and leaders in their own right. Imagine a young noblewoman in 12th century Europe. Her husband is called to war, or perhaps he dies, or remains at court. Her role shifts from consort to manager, running lands, collecting rents, negotiating with tenants, hiring laborers, protecting rights. Historians note that in medieval Western Europe, especially between 1000 and 1350, elite women had real authority over household affairs and could act as landowners in their own right, especially when widowed or in absence of a male lord. Some women took this further. A widow with resources might become both patron and founder of religious houses, using her wealth and influence to establish abbeys, monasteries, or convents. Eustadiola, a noblewoman in 7th century France, did precisely that. Widowed early, she used her independence not merely to retire quietly, but to fund churches and a convent, live as an ascetic, and serve the poor. Other women found their strength in religious life, not confined, weak, or silent, but as dynamic centers of learning, administration, and politics. The nunnery was more than cloister and prayer. It was a complex institution. In a medium-sized convent, senior nuns managed budgets, oversaw estates, maintained buildings, tended libraries, supervised novices, purchased goods, and corresponded with clergy and officials. Catherine of Sutton, abbess of Bingen Abbey in 14th century England, governed both the spiritual and temporal affairs of her convent. She oversaw landholdings, managed relations with local lords and church authorities, and led the community's liturgical life. Elizabeth von Wetzikon in 13th century Zurich held even greater authoritarism as imperial abbess of Fröminster. She ruled like a sovereign, holding judicial power, levying taxes, minting coins, and influencing city decisions. In her hands, abbess and ruler became one. Even convents that seemed enclosed were deeply connected to their communities. Nuns ran schools for girls, cared for the sick, provided alms, copied manuscripts, offered sanctuary, and advised nobles and clergy. Some wrote visionary works that influenced theology and literature. Hildegard of Bingen is perhaps the most renowned. Born in 1098 in Germany, she became an abbess, a mystic, a writer, a composer, and an advisor to popes and emperors. Her visions explored theology, her writings covered medicine and nature, and her voice carried across Europe as both spiritual and intellectual authority. Another is Guda, a 12th century German nun and illuminita. Within her manuscript work, she included a self-portrait, a rare and powerful statement of identity by a woman artist in a male-dominated craft. And yet, religious life for women was not uniform. Some became anchoresses, women enclosed in small cells attached to churches, living in solitude. Julian of Norwich was one such woman. From her small cell she wrote Revelations of Divine Love, one of the first books in English written by a woman. Others became Begin's laywomen, living in community, without formal vows, balancing work and prayer while helping the poor. Christina of Marquiat's story stands out. In the early 12th century, her family forced her into marriage despite her vow of virginity. She resisted, escaped, and lived as a hermit before founding a religious house of her own. Her life reflects both spiritual conviction and extraordinary independence. Not all influential women were noble. Many came from humble origins, joining religious houses where they contributed through literacy, administration, healing, teaching, and agriculture. Hospitaller sisters, for example, were responsible for hospitals managing supplies and caring for pilgrims and the sick. The strengths of medieval women also surfaced during times of crisis. When lords went to war or lands were threatened, women organized defenses, negotiated truces, and kept communities functioning. During plagues and famines, they coordinated aid and helped preserve order. In legal disputes over property, inheritance, and dowries, they acted as negotiators, witnesses, and plaintiffs. Saint Ludberga from 9th century Saxony offers another glimpse into this power. She began by managing households and estates for a noblewoman, but her deep faith made her a spiritual guide for many. Later she joined a convent where her wisdom and leadership drew pilgrims and students from afar. All these threads of vestic management, religious leadership, artistic creation, political authority, we have a picture of remarkable female agency in the Middle Ages. Their power was not loud or ostentatious. It was quiet, persistent, and deeply rooted in duty, faith, and intellect. Yet for centuries, these women were forgotten. The bias of historians, the loss of records, and the glorification of male heroes pushed them into obscurity. But their legacy endures in the abbeys they built, the manuscripts they wrote, and the influence they carried through generations. We have only fragments, but those fragments speak volumes. They reveal abbesses who ruled lands, widows who built institutions, nuns who preserved knowledge, and women who held families and communities together through chaos. Their stories deserve to be remembered, because they changed the way we understand the Middle Ages. They remind us that women were never merely supporting characters, they were the backbone of faith, learning, and survival itself. If you believe more people should hear about these powerful women history forgot, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more untold stories that shaped our world.